Welcome back to the Warcraft news. It's basically our first episode of the year and we've got a fair bit to do. Blizzard has been doing a bunch of tweaking to Shadowlands, and included in that are a lot of things that I think are going to make a lot of you very happy. Of course, we're now all in that post-expansion launch phase where, we've got used to the expansion, things are getting a bit funky, we kind of have a good idea of the pros and the cons, and I think that's a pretty good place to be in ahead of big announcements that are going to be on the way from Blizzard, because of course, Blizzcon is happening in but a few weeks. Which quite conveniently leads us on to the first section of this video. BlizzCon is just a few weeks away. It is the 19th and 20th of February, and Blizz have begun their marketing push. Okay, this time the whole thing is free. There's no virtual ticket shenanigans. You can watch the whole thing for free. But that said, of course, they're a big company. They got to make their beans. So they're going to be upselling on 3 different tiers. So for the sake of World of Warcraft, right, there's a $20 option that gets you a pet, a $40 one that gets a mount, and a $60 one that also gets 30 days of game time on top of all of that stuff. Plus, of course, a whole bunch of other things for the other Blizzard games. That's just stuff like, guaranteed legendary loot boxes in Overwatch, legendary Hearthstone cards. Yeah, it's Blizzard assembling whatever goodie bag they can to, get $60 out of you. It's what we'd expect. What else then? Well, honestly, the key art doesn't have too many surprises. Yes, Jim Raynor is there, and we all know that StarCraft 2 has been wound down, so I think he's just there because he's a big Blizzard character. I mean, Illidan is there, but he's there for Hearthstone, and there's no surprises that Diablo 4 and Shadowlands have got their spots in the key art. I'll admit I did expect a more prominent feature for Overwatch than just a smallish diva in the background. So overall, if we're going to try to read the tea leaves here, what's going on? Honestly, I don't think that much. I don't really think we can read into this key art like we did with that past Jaina one where, we saw it was Jaina, we could piece things together and roughly expect what Blizzard were going to talk about at that BlizzCon. And the final thing before we get into the actual video is, the Helm of Domination. Do you want one? Because if you do, you'll be able to buy one on the store, which, is pretty neat. Maybe we'll get one for the video set. But okay, let's talk about the video game announcement section. So, Shadowlands patch 9.1, 9.1.5, and 9.2 will almost certainly be talked about, right? Then, World of Warcraft Classic, The Burning Crusade. I think that will almost certainly be announced. I mean, it's even been mentioned in official Blizzard questionnaires. So, yeah, it'll happen. And regular Classic is, of course, winding down a bit as the patch cycle finishes up. So, really no surprises for World of Warcraft. What about Diablo then? Well, D4, I would say, is very far off. Very far off. So I would expect another chunky development update, but very much nothing solid in terms of dates or betas. But that might not be it for Diablo, because a Diablo 2 remaster is in the works. Quite a dramatic story. More about that later on in today's video, but we know that's in the works, and I would not be surprised if that is something that they announced at this BlizzCon. There's then Overwatch 2. It's a funny one. I mean, we're all flabbergasted at how slow Overwatch development has been, right? I mean, the quantity of new stuff is pretty low in the base game, and if you actually look at what they announced for Overwatch 2 back at that BlizzCon, to my eye, it looked like Overwatch 1.5 and basically another excuse to charge $60 again. So maybe the scope of Overwatch 2 has actually increased to be worthy of being called Overwatch 2. I don't know, but based on what I saw, and then, based on that, it was quite surprising when we then saw Jeff Kaplan really trying to temper people's expectations and say, oh, don't worry, next BlizzCon we'll still be talking about it as if it's far off. So, who knows? I mean, that could just be Jeff sandbagging his dates for safety. Hard to say. I do think that, though, a more firm Overwatch 2 announcement is more likely than a firm Diablo 4 announcement. So yeah, there you go. And I know this is not super exciting. I'd say this. Do expect to see mobile games for all the Blizzard IPs. Oh yeah, Diablo Immortal, that's in closed testing now, and apparently is actually quite good as far as mobile, action RPGs go. I'm not too interested in it, but I would expect to see something about it as well. What I was going to say though is I'd expect to see, new project mobile games for just about everything Blizzard does, because that's a big Activision Blizzard push after the likes of COD Mobile going gangbusters. But for right now, really, it seems to me that Blizzard's core goal is to just get their existing IPs, their existing opportunities, and just work on them and get them out there before they do anything big and surprising. Because to be honest, Blizzard, I think most people would say they've been dragging their feet for the last bunch of years. So maybe they'll, maybe the big ambitious stuff will happen in a few years. But I think for right now, they just know they need Overwatch 2, they need Diablo 4, they need to keep WoW going good. If they do that, then their business is good, strong, and stable, and then the more interesting things could maybe happen. Okay, that's that. I should mention Hearthstone Heroes of the Storm. They'll just get more of the usual, I would say. All right, before we jump into more news, Patreon this month. Do you want a nice shield to go with last month's sword, which we're currently packing up to post off to you? Well, if you do, then the February month of Patreon will get you that, as well as fresh art and this sticker, which, man, I really love this particular sticker we've got this month. And then, of course, all the rest we do in Patreon, there's some early access, there's daily briefing, and later on in this video, you'll learn more about the larger things that we've got planned. But okay, with that said, let's get into some class balance changes. Well, class balance sure has been a crazy thing between patch 8.3's corruption and Shadowlands' covenants, where realistically, and according to the data that Preach and Raider.io attained from the Blizzard API, people just went with what was mathematically best with the covenants almost all of the time. It's been quite funny with balance, and if you look at performance spreads right now, it's pretty clear that there's a large difference between the top and the bottom, at least, for your Mythic Plus and your rating for the specs. Now, the good news here is that those gaps will decrease. Blizzard have announced a bunch of flat buffs to multiple specs, usually around 5%. Now, in most cases, this is not going to be enough to greatly shake up the class rankings. If you're 20% behind, a 5% buff ain't going to feel great. Now, these buffs are hitting SV and BM Hunter, the DPS Warriors, Frost DK and Frost Mage, Havoc, Assassination, Enhancement, and Destro. So, there you go. Look, what this is just typical mid-patch balancing. Generally, Blizzard know that people make their big gameplay decisions for a patch early on, and they know that big, hectic, large balance changes would mess around with what people have done and the time that they've invested. So usually in situations like this, Blizzard goes a little bit more conservative, trying to improve people's experiences without shaking up the general order of things a bit too much. But still, in a few cases, these buffs do seem a little bit small. Overall, though, I would expect larger changes along with 9.1. Next up, Torghast. Torghast. It's the feature that we really loved during beta. You will have heard that from almost anyone in the beta, especially as it got to the end. And, there's a lot of cool stuff. But why is it that Torghast hits the video game and suddenly, people have got a lukewarm response? Well, I'd say it's down to the live implementation of Torghast. Man, grinding up all of those layer unlocks in addition to doing the faction leader recovery quests on a weekly basis. That was a slog that made a lot of people feel a bit bitter about the amount of time they put in Torghast. Doubly so in those situations where, their class is a bit iffy in Torghast, they got some bad luck, and oh dear, now you put an hour in, you got no soul ash. Bit of a recipe for not respecting the player's time. Kind of iffy. So that was a bit annoying in mains. But then you roll an alt, and suddenly you've got to regrind every single layer, and all of your faction leader quests. That sucked the big one, didn't it? And then, by the time the people had done all of that stuff for their legendaries, well, then the Twisting Corridors opened. And it wasn't really appealing to people because they'd already been through what many people would say is like the worst Torghast experience you could get. And in a situation where they were doing it not because they loved Torghast, but because they needed the soul ash. So, ouch. Now, the good news here is that Blizzard are making Torghast layer unlocks account-wide. So, if you got to layer 8 on your main, layer 8 will be open up in your alt. Good. Realistically, though, far more changes needed. For now, this is good. But as I just said in the previous segment, again, we'll have to wait until patch 9.1 for more. And speaking of missed potential, the mission table. So Blizzard admitted, they said, that they designed some of the Kyrian companions to be tanky, and other ones to be glass cannons, but that ultimately, many players didn't really pick up on this. I'd say, perhaps being a bit too used to the more brainless iterations of the mission table of the past. And fair enough to those people, because the situation is, the new mission table is way more interesting, fundamentally, in how it works, but it's just a lot a lot less utilized. It feels underutilized, doesn't it? So it's hard to get excited about learning the ins and outs of this system when it's just kind of giving you the same old boring stuff that we're used to in mission tables. Well, Blizzard have basically acknowledged this, and they've rebalanced the Kyrian companions to be generally less fragile and have more consistent damage. In a way, it's kind of removing strategy, but I guess they feel it's strategy the players were not really appreciating. A similar thing, by the way, did happen to the Venthyr, and for the Night Fae like myself, well, our Trapper troops had a bug that applied a perma damage done reduction to enemies, which made things pretty easy. That bug has since been fixed, so our extra material, soul ash and anima will not be quite as easy to get. It's an odd situation with the mission table. It is more interesting in how it works, but man, the rewards aren't really that interesting. It feels like more could have been done there. And I would sort of say, look, you either make it a game system, make it really awesome, put a bunch of effort into it, or you just don't bother and spend your time elsewhere. I mean, if it's just going to be a bit half-arsed, why are we even doing it? I mean, is it because now, a WoW expansion has to have a mission table? Really? Is that it? I don't know. Just feels a weird 2 steps forward, 2 steps back situation. We're just kind of left where we always are with the mission tables, just scratching our heads a bit. What do you think? Anyway, let's move on. Okay, the big Blizzard shakeup. This is a fun one. So we covered this with a full video on our news channel. So we will do a TLDR here, but if you want the full thing, go watch the video. Right, after the failure of Warcraft 3 Reforged, Blizzard wound down the Classic Games team and Team 1. And that is such that staff then had to reapply for their jobs. Now, to make up for this, and this team being wound down, Vicarious Visions, a long-time Activision studio, has been absorbed into Blizzard. Now, this move has seen the studio head of Vicarious Visions become a vice president at Blizzard. So, in a way, yes, it quite literally is some Activision moving in and getting more power within Blizzard, and also, well, their staff. However, is that really a bad thing? Because it feels kind of hard to say this, but, your yearly Call of Duty comes out, it's what you expect. Vicarious Visions, the last few games that they did were absolutely brilliant, And if you look at Blizzard's track record, it has been a bit iffy as of late. I mean, Warcraft 3 Reforged does not hold a candle to any of the other Activision remasters. Activision did a better job of Crash Racing, Crash Trilogy, Spyro Trilogy, Tony Hawk Remaster. Activision blew the socks off what Blizzard Entertainment did with Warcraft 3 Reforged. It was a complete mess, but I will say that from what we understand there, War 3 Reforged was a complete mess because of Blizzard management. It was because of unrealistic expectations, bad management practices, all setting the Classic Games team up for failure, which is really sad, because Warcraft 3 deserved better. Now, as for Vicarious Visions, sources say that they are now helming the heavily rumored Diablo 2 remake. Now, this is a good sign for the D2 remake, and the reason why is that the Crash Trilogy and the Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 remasters were essentially perfection. They truly were wonderful. Wonderful enough to cut through any of that, Activision suspicion. No, they were both brilliant products. So, what does that mean? Well, if Tony Hawk's anything to go by, I trust Vicarious Visions to capture the heart and soul of Diablo 2 and also to make it feel and play new and smooth. I think they can pull it off. Their track record certainly suggests so. Now, for those people who wanted to see Vicarious Visions maybe work on other things like more Tony Hawk content, this is obviously very sad news because a lot of those people won't want to see that great team making Blizzard content, but there you go. Certainly, though, the demise of Team 1, the creators of StarCraft 2 and Heroes of the Storm and other things is sad. It is sad. And there's another reason why you should be a bit sad. I think it dashes hopes of Warcraft 4, because from what we understand, Team 1 was the real-time strategy team. So, there you go. Maybe, though, that's a team whose essence may live on in the Blizzard successor companies of Frost Giant and Dreamhaven. I certainly hope so. Then next up, a bit of old news, but I think old news that could end up being quite good news. Ian Hazzikostas gave an interview to PC Gamer, and they covered a bunch of things like the state of Shadowlands, but what Ian did say is that one area they're looking at is gear. Yes, I mean, what is the situation, me, Preach, all these people, we all, this cabal of people got together and went, oh, we want no Titan forging, we're going to take away your loot. And then suddenly you're in this situation in Shadowlands where, oh, guess what? Yeah, you get less loot. It Titan forges, not at all. And, I think that's fantastic for the game. I think the damage and the just utter destruction of player psyches that was inflicted by the Diabloification and the Destiny 2 and 1ification of World of Warcraft was just so damaging to the core of the game. Now that said, back in the day when we had less gear than we got in Legion and in BFA, we also did have things like currency systems, including in PvE content. Right? You got your badges of, was it Justice and Valor, or, it was badges of Frost and stuff back in Wrath, but that's what was going on back then. Of course, what happened, though, is that Blizzard decided that the Great Vault basically was enough to account for losing Titan Forging and not having a currency system. You then, of course, look at the people who seem to be enjoying gearing the most these days, and that's the PvPers, because it's pretty simple. You turn up, you do your PvP, you get some honor points, get some conquest points, you buy some gear, you get some gear from the Great Vault, you take it to the vendor, and you upgrade it when you're pushing your rating. So they feel like they've got a gearing system they can plan around, etc., etc., etc. Well, in that interview with PC Gamer, Ian said that gearing is one area they're looking at. So, does this mean Valor points are returning? It's hard to say. It really is hard to say, because you do end up in this sort of situation where, well, it's funny, actually. It's a situation of perspectives, because if you're getting a whole bunch of gear by doing your PvE, and then you can upgrade your gear like in the PvP system, then you could argue that, man, that would be a lot of gear going up really, really, really quick. And if you could, say, upgrade gear via, Valor points, then you do a normal raid. Could you then upgrade your normal raid gear up to heroic level? Would that not erode heroic and kind of take away from some of the point of a more simplified gearing system? Or would it be a situation where Blizzard would just open up, a vendor with a library of Valor point pieces that you could get to fill in your off slots? It's hard to say exactly, but I do think that, we've got Ian saying that they're looking at gearing in a PvE situation, how they can make that better. What I would say is, I think there's two options. I think either you increase very slightly the amount of loot that you get from the likes of raids. That's one thing you can do. I think another thing you can do, though, is bring in a system like Valor points. And I think there's a big thing for Valor points with RPG players, and that is you give RPG players a task to achieve, you give them a little bar to measure it, like your Valor points, man, they're going to go do it. It's RPG players. Come on, you know what we're like. And we know this because it works for PvP as well, and it did work in the past of this game. So I have to wonder if something like that would work better. It's hard to say exactly, but certainly I'll say this. Getting 35 anima from, spending an hour and a half progressing on a boss doesn't feel great. Now, I'm still very happy with my Stone Legion General's heroic, kill. We lost people from our roster. We eventually got the kill. All very, very good. Very happy. Had a beautiful, fun time raiding. And then I got 35 anima, which to me wasn't a massive bummer because I was there for the raid to clear the content. But certainly, 35 anima. I'm not excited about that, am I? So that is a case where if I was just to get 50 Valor points or something like that instead for my efforts, at least I'd feel like it was maybe working towards a future goal. I think that's something that could work out a bit better. So anyway, that's what Ian said about gearing. Who knows? Like most of today's video, I think we just have to chalk it up to, we'll see what happens in patch 9.1. It certainly will be funny, though, if the story of Ian Hazakostas at BlizzCon is basically him coming up on stage and saying, okay, right, so, those things we did recently that were different to the things we did in the past. The good news is we've ceased doing the things we've been doing and we're going back to the past. And then everyone claps. Maybe there's a lesson to be learnt in how progressively undoing the changes of Legion and BFA, the AP stuff, keeps on getting BlizzCon claps. So maybe if they, it worked when they applied that to PvP gearing, maybe it'll work if they apply it to a little bit more of PvE gearing. Hard to say. So to finish us off, I just wanted to muse a bit in the state of Shadowlands, where I'm going to say this. It is successful, objectively so. Sold pretty damn well, didn't it? I would say that there are some some things that are mixed, even though my personal experience has been quite good. You know, I had an initial period of gearing up in PvP, blast, loved it. You know, John, who I believe is editing this video, is heading up our guild's PvP section, so I really want to go and get into some rated battlegrounds. It's going to be really fun. But I then think about what am I actually doing in the game versus all of the things Blizzard spent time doing making it. And then I look at the Covenants, and I look at the Conduits, and I look at the mission table, and so many aspects of this expansion, and I just think, oh, cool, that was a big waste of development time, wasn't it? Because you look at Covenants, and it's like, most specs go to one Covenant. They do. And whenever Preach and Raider.io were getting that, that wasn't a sample of Raider.io's, you know, sweaty, try-hard, capital G gamers wanting to be in the MDI. No, it wasn't that straw man. That was just a general pool, I believe, of Blizzard's API, of, like, characters. You know, not perfect, but it did show that for the most part, yeah, specs just go to one Covenant anyway. So in that case, why spend so much time making 4 kits for every single class and then having to balance, you know, 4 sets of Covenant abilities, 4 sets of soul binds, 4 sets of, you know, all the stuff. I mean, man, what's going on? And then Conduits. Who cares about Conduits? I mean, I don't. I could be an outlier, but I have not thought about Conduits in so long, to the point where I think back to all of the humming and hawing over, we're going to have conduit energy, or we're going to have this about conduits that, or maybe conduits will be consumables. And I just think, why did we bother with any of that? The game's out. None of it mattered. Why do we put time into that? So really, to me, the wins of Shadowlands seem to be the removal of pain points that the team stuffed the game with, such that playing basic World of Warcraft content, you know, your dungeons, your raids, your PvP, is just something that you feel like you're being fought with less. And I think it's really interesting that they can launch an expansion that maybe could do with a bit more content and has a few iffy things, but purely the fact that it fights with its players less has meant that it's been quite successful and people have been having fun and playing more. So I think that's really heartening, because you know what it tells us? It tells us that core WoW content is something that people want to go and play with their friends. And to me, I think that leaves us with such a clear lesson, and that is systems. Get ye gone. Systems in the bin. Goodbye. Not necessarily in the bin, but let's focus less on systems that we can try to, you know, psych out players with so that they just spend loads of time grinding, and just finally admit that content is king. That absolutely is the core thing. And I think as we move into 9.1 and beyond, what I want to see is a lot less systemic complexity from Blizzard's designs. I want to see things that are more easily balanceable, that don't look like they're infinite time sinks of dev time, such that the bits of the game that you play that you actually want to engage with, you know, not silly things like conduits, such that that is what gets the effort of the WoW devs. Man, Torghast, Twisting Corridors, you know, big feature. It's got so fewer rewards than Island Expeditions. What's going on, you know? And then just when I was thinking about that stuff, and I was talking about gearing earlier, I should mention Mythic Plus players. I'm not really one of you. I'm more of a raid person, but I do understand your pain point where it's like, yeah, I could do 1 Mythic Plus really high. There we go. Happy with my weekly box. Or, you know, I could go and spend like 6 hours more just to get more choices for 1 bit of loot, and then the Mythic Plus players don't really feel like they're being rewarded well for their time. Maybe that's also a situation where you could change nothing about Mythic Plus gear right now, but just add in VP, and maybe they'd be happy. And maybe if VP was an option, like a fallback option from the weekly chest, and that could be a thing as well. I mean, it's kind of tricky. When you really try to capture all of your progression into a weekly chest, you know, outside of direct boss drops, then I think it just does get a bit tricky. But look, there you go. I think really for me, my thought here of the state of Shadowlands is it's revealed that you really don't need the big complex systems. It's revealed that I think content is king. That's what people want to do. You know, whenever you just give people a simple framework to succeed within, I think the PvP gearing system is a good example of that. Then I think people are quite easily mentally able to engage in those systems, and they feel like their progress is meaningful. There you go. That's my thought on that. So that's my thoughts on the state of Shadowlands. Next, the state of us. Okay, look, I know that we started off real slow this year. We did it on purpose. To be honest with you, I ended last year with no fuel in the tank. I had a bit of a hell year in the, you know, not on a professional front, but just outside things. Total hell year, sucked. And, you know, a few of our guys are having a bit of a rough time of it as well. And I'm sure many of you are. I mean, man, it's not a Not a great period of time to be existing in, is it? But, you know, I realized, look, I just don't have it in me to sit down and pump out content right now. I'm not in that place. So what we instead did is we tried to focus a little bit more on the big picture, right? And, you know, one example of that, the Azeroth video that we did. You know, that's like 38 minutes of going through the lore. And our intent there was like, yeah, this is just an evergreen video. No matter what, you can click on that, you learn about Azeroth. Happy, you know, not, you know, some big, you won't believe about this. No, just like, we just wanted to make like, here's some long, fucking great content. You can go chill out on the couch with a few beers and enjoy it. That was really our goal. So I want to see how we can do more and more and more of those things, right? Really so that there's that sort of lore content you can be cozy to and just relax with, and then some of that general entertainment content. I really want to just make things a bit more fun to watch. So that's some thoughts there. Now, there's bigger plans for series and stuff that I very much, we're working on that are for the period like after we've stabilized, and got everything good. Speaking of stabilization, well, we've moved over from using Monday.com as our productivity software, and we've moved over to Notion. I did a decently complex, big build in Notion, which is now how we do our task management, our project management, and all of that stuff. And basically what that's meant is there's less crossed wires, each video has got its big Notion sort of hub, and from that, everybody can see all the info they need. You don't need to go around emailing people, or, well, we don't do that, but, pinging people in Slack or stuff like that. It's just a lot more nice and simple. So we're finding good benefits there. The hope is, of course, that allows us to do more and more things as we just get better as a team. The other thing, Patreon. So right now, we're working really hard on speeding up fulfillment. We had, December was rough, absolutely, and there's been some sort of COVID-related delays with postage, but we're really working hard on that. Now, there's the daily briefing and early access that is going on over there now. For personal content from me, I do have plans drafted out. It's been hard to get some of the ball rolling in that. So there is that. There's also some podcast stuff that I know me and Matt would like to do. So a bunch of experiments, and that's mostly stuff that we want to kick off this quarter. Then the other thing is the news channel. So with the news channel, we're changing things up a little bit. We're basically trying to focus less on breaking news. I was thinking about, how do I want this channel to be successful? Do I want it to be successful because we're always just sitting there ready to drop everything that we're doing to cover the most recent bit of breaking news? Or would I rather that channel is successful by us finding stories and topics and features that we're passionate about that we can spend, a week writing and a week editing? That's what we'd rather do, If you could be successful doing the super, super fast breaking news or doing the more in-depth, I'd say more creative stuff. I mean, obviously, you'd want to do the latter. So we're going to be working those features into our content plan. We still are actually going to be doing news, just a little bit differently and trying to make it just, more synthesized. Making sure there's no bloat, making sure whenever you click on that, your time is being respected. So yeah, news channel, we really are working on it. It's one of our top priorities is getting that in a real good spot. The other thing then is game dev, where we're on the cusp of very, very good news. I can say that, but I can also say that this is the time where the only response that I can give you is basically no comment, because you can't really give comment whenever talks are happening. But suffice to say that I'm saying that, take as good news. That was a pretty roundabout way of getting to the point, wasn't it? But anyway, that's the situation. That's a bunch of the WoW news that's happened, bunch of discussion, bunch of stuff, everything's going on. Okay, we're all caught up. It's a pity it only took me till the 2nd of February to record a WoW news, but hey, that's just how it is sometimes. All right, it's going to be a hype month. We're going to get Blizzcon. We're going to get patches for Shadowlands. A lot of exciting things, so hope you're all as excited as I am. With that said, thank you for watching. I will see you next time.